problem with hope was that it arrived quietly, without permission, and always at the worst possible time. He hadn't planned to feel it tonight. The single dad stood outside the restaurant for a long moment, his hand resting on the cold glass door, watching reflections move inside. People laughing, glasses clinking, lives unfolding without him. He checked his phone again, even though he already knew the time. He was 5 minutes early. That alone felt reckless. He hadn't been on a date in almost 3 years. Not since life had narrowed into school drop-offs, overdue bills, late-night emails, and whispered bedtime promises that everything would be okay, even when he wasn't sure it would be. The babysitter had canceled twice before finally agreeing. His suit was borrowed from his brother. The tie was knotted too tight because his hands still didn't trust themselves to relax. It's just dinner, he told himself. One conversation. No expectations. That was the lie he needed to get through the door. Inside, the hostess glanced at him, then down at the reservation list. Her smile flickered, not rude, just uncertain. "Blind date?" she asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded. She led him to a small table near the window. The lighting was warm, forgiving. He sat, folded his hands together, and waited. While he waited, his thoughts wandered, dangerous territory. His daughter had hugged him extra tight before he left, her arms wrapping around his waist like she sensed something fragile about the night. "You'll be back before midnight, right?" she'd asked. "Of course," he'd said. "I promise." Promises were the only currency he never allowed himself to default on. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He didn't mind. Waiting was something he'd learned to do well, waiting for paychecks, for school approvals, for things to stop breaking. Waiting didn't scare him. Rejection did. She arrived exactly 18 minutes late. Not rushed, not apologetic, just composed. She was elegant in a way that didn't ask for attention. Tailored coat, minimal jewelry, the kind of calm confidence that made rooms adjust around her instead of the other way around. She looked at him once, twice. Then she smiled politely and sat down. "Sorry," she said. "Work ran over." "No problem," he replied quickly. Too quickly. "I understand." That was true. Understanding had become second nature. They ordered drinks. She chose water. He chose coffee, despite the hour, because caffeine felt safer than alcohol. The conversation began gently enough, names, vague professions, surface-level questions designed to avoid sharp edges. She spoke about business in abstract terms. He spoke about logistics. Neither volunteered anything personal at first. Then she asked. "So," she said, folding her hands neatly on the table, "do you have family?" The question landed heavier than it should have. "Yes," he said after a brief pause. "I have a daughter." Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough for him to notice. A flicker of calculation, a recalibration. "Oh," she said. "How old?" 7. Another pause. "And her mother?" The question wasn't cruel. It was efficient, like an interviewer checking qualifications. "She passed away," he said quietly. 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," she replied, and this time her voice softened, genuinely. But something else followed behind it, distance. The waiter arrived. Interrupted. A mercy. They ate. Halfway through the meal, she asked about his work. He answered honestly. Contract work, unstable hours, good months and terrifying ones. No exaggeration. No self-pity. Honesty had cost him before. He'd learned not to dress it up. She listened. She nodded. Then she leaned back slightly and said the words he'd been bracing for since she sat down. "I don't think this is what I'm looking for." There it was. Clean. Polite. Surgical. He smiled anyway. "That's okay." She hesitated, as if expecting resistance. "I mean," she continued, "you seem kind, responsible, but I'm at a point in my life where I need certainty." "I understand," he said again, because he did. She glanced at the ringless hand resting on the table, at the worn cuff of his jacket, at the faint exhaustion he never quite managed to hide. She didn't mean to judge, but judgment didn't require intent. They finished the meal quickly after that. When the check came, he reached for it automatically. She didn't argue. Outside, the night air felt colder than before. He stepped aside to let her pass, already rehearsing the quiet dignity he'd perfected over the years. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "I wish you the best." "You too." She turned to leave. That should have been the end. It would have been if she hadn't stopped after 3 steps. She stood there, back to him, unmoving. Then she turned around slowly. "Wait." He looked up, surprised. Her expression was no longer polite or distant. It was tense, focused, almost desperate. "There's something I need to ask you," she said. His instinct was to brace himself. Rejection always had an aftershock. "Yes." She took a breath, a real one this time. "What if," she said carefully, "this wasn't a date?" He frowned. "I'm sorry." "What if," she continued, lowering her voice, "I didn't need romance tonight?" The silence stretched between them. "What if I needed a husband?" The word hung in the air, heavy and absurd and impossible. He stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "A husband?" "Yes." His mind scrambled to catch up. "This isn't funny," he said gently. Not offended, just confused. "I'm not joking." "Then I think—" "Please," she interrupted. "Just listen." Her composure cracked, just enough to reveal the pressure underneath. Whatever she was carrying, it wasn't small. "I need someone legally married to me," she said. "Soon. Very soon." He shook his head once. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she replied. "You're honest. You showed up. You didn't pretend to be something you're not. That doesn't make me. It makes you safe." That word stopped him. Safe. No one had used that word about him in a long time. She held his gaze, eyes searching his face not for attraction, but for permission. "For you, it would be temporary," she added. "Contractual. You'd be compensated. Your daughter would be protected." His chest tightened. "My daughter? I wouldn't involve her," she said quickly. "Not directly. But your stability matters. I wouldn't ask if it didn't." He took a step back. "This is too much." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm asking now. Before you walk away." He looked at the street, at the passing cars, at the ordinary world that made sense. Then he looked back at her. "You're asking me to marry you," he said slowly, "after rejecting me." "Yes." "Why?" She hesitated. Then she said the truth, just enough of it. "Because if I don't," she said, "I lose everything." The words settled deep, and for the first time that night, hope didn't feel reckless. Felt dangerous. He didn't answer her right away. That was the first thing he did right. The night had shifted, and he could feel it, like a floor subtly tilting beneath his feet. The street noise felt louder now, sharper. Somewhere nearby, a car horn blared, impatient and alive, as if reminding him that normal life still existed, that this conversation didn't belong to it. "I think," he said slowly, choosing each word like a stepping stone, "you should explain what you mean by lose everything." She nodded once, as if she'd been expecting that exact response. "Not here," she said. "Not on the sidewalk." She gestured toward the restaurant, then hesitated, glancing at the door as if it no longer felt safe. Finally, she pointed toward a quiet cafe across the street, still open, mostly empty. They sat at a corner table, far from the counter. No menus, no small talk, just 2 people who were no longer pretending this was a date. She took a breath, folded her hands, then unfolded them again. The composure she wore so easily earlier now seemed heavier, like armor left on too long. "I run a company," she began. "Public-facing, family-owned, at least on paper." He nodded. He'd suspected something like that. The way she spoke, the way people unconsciously made room for her. "There are clauses," she continued, "written by men who never expected someone like me to be in charge. Marriage clauses, succession clauses." His brow furrowed. "If I'm not married by the end of this 1/4, she said, control shifts. Not legally forever, but long enough for them to dismantle what I've built. Who is they? He asked. My brother. The board members who back him. People who think I'm temporary. He absorbed that in silence. And you want me to be what? He asked finally. A placeholder? Yes, she said. Then, after a beat. And no. He let out a quiet breath through his nose. You rejected me, he said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. 5 minutes later, you're asking me to marry you. You have to understand how that sounds. I do, she replied. That's why I didn't ask you to pretend you loved me. I asked you to be my husband. That's not better. It's honest. Honesty again. The word hovered between them like a fragile bridge. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Not dramatic. Not thick. Prepared, but not theatrical. I wouldn't trap you, she said. Everything would be in writing. Time limited. Clear exit terms. He didn't touch the folder. What about your life? He asked. Your family. Your reputation. My reputation is already under threat, she said quietly. This protects it. And my daughter? He pressed. You mentioned her before. Her expression softened, not performative but careful. She would never be used, she said. She wouldn't even need to know the details. As far as the world is concerned, you'd be my husband. As far as she's concerned, you're her father, nothing changes. He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. Nothing changes. That was the lie buried inside every dangerous decision. You're asking me to step into your world, he said. A world I don't belong to. She met his gaze. You belong wherever you choose to stand. He almost laughed at that. Almost. Silence stretched. He thought of rent notices folded carefully in a drawer. Of school permission slips he hesitated to sign because field trips cost money. Of nights spent awake calculating futures that never quite added up. And he thought of his daughter's arms around his waist. You said this would be temporary, he said. How temporary? 1 year, she replied. Minimum. Enough time to stabilize control. Renegotiate terms. And after that? We divorce. Just like that. He studied her face, searching for cracks. For cruelty. For manipulation. He didn't see it. What he saw instead was pressure. And something like fear. You don't trust me, she said. I don't trust the situation, he corrected. That's fair. She slid the folder toward him, not pushing, just placing. You don't have to answer tonight, she said. But I need an answer soon. He looked at the folder. Still didn't open it. Why me? He asked again. There must be 100 men who would jump at this. Yes, she said. And that's exactly why I didn't choose them. He frowned. They'd want leverage, she explained. Access. Control. Something in return. And you think I wouldn't? She shook her head. No. You don't negotiate love. You endure responsibility. The words hit harder than he expected. He stood slowly. I need to think, he said. She nodded. Of course. He paused, then added, if I say no, what happens? Her jaw tightened. I fight, she said. And I probably lose. He didn't like the way that sat in his chest. Outside, the air felt heavier now. The ordinary night had transformed into something charged, unfamiliar. They walked a short distance together before stopping. I'll call you, she said. He nodded. Then, because honesty had already crossed the table once tonight, he said, if I even consider this, there are conditions. Her eyes sharpened, not defensive. Attentive. Go on. No lies that put my child at risk, he said. Ever. Agreed. No emotional manipulation, he continued. This stays what it is. She nodded again. And if I walk away, he finished. You don't chase. She hesitated. Just a second. Then she said, understood. They parted without touching. That night, after he tucked his daughter into bed, she asked, half asleep, did you have fun? He kissed her forehead. I had a conversation, he said. Later, alone in the kitchen, he opened the folder. Contracts. Clean language. Clear numbers. Stability stared back at him from the page. So did risk. He closed the folder and leaned against the counter, staring into the quiet. By morning, he knew. He just didn't know how to say it out loud. The courthouse didn't look like the place where lives were supposed to change. It was quiet, beige, and efficiently unromantic. No flowers. No witnesses who mattered. No music. Just a clerk with tired eyes and a pen that scratched across paper like it had done this too many times before. He signed his name carefully. She signed hers without hesitation. When it was done, the clerk slid the papers forward and said, "Congratulations." The word felt misplaced. Outside, the sun was already too bright, as if the world was mocking the gravity of what they'd just done. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. "This is temporary," he said finally. "Yes," she replied. "Temporary." They didn't smile. The first rule they agreed on was silence. Not literal silence, but controlled truth. No unnecessary explanations. No emotional disclosures that could blur lines. Their marriage would exist on paper, in public spaces, and nowhere else. They moved quickly after that. By the end of the week, his clothes were in a guest room of a penthouse he never would have known existed otherwise. The ceilings were high enough to make his footsteps echo. The windows overlooked a city he'd always experienced from street level. "This room is yours," she said, standing in the doorway. "Nothing gets changed without your consent." He appreciated that more than she knew. They ate dinners together formally at first. Polite conversation, neutral topics, schedules, appearances. In public, they held hands. Not tightly, not affectionately, just enough. The first time cameras flashed, his instinct was to pull away. She didn't tighten her grip. Later that night, she spoke quietly from across the kitchen island. "You don't owe me performance," she said. "Only consistency." "I can do that," he replied. At work, things escalated faster than he expected. Colleagues whispered. Executives smiled too brightly. The word husband followed him into rooms like a shadow. He learned quickly when to speak and when to stay silent. He watched her navigate meetings with precision, never once introducing him as anything other than "my husband," as if repetition alone could make it unchallengeable. Her brother was the first to test him. He appeared unannounced one evening, confidence radiating off him like entitlement. "So," the brother said, eyeing him over a glass of whiskey, "you're the surprise." He met the man's gaze evenly. "I suppose so." The brother smiled, thin and sharp. "What do you do?" "I work," he said simply. Silence stretched. That night, she didn't apologize for her brother. She only said, "He's looking for cracks." "I won't give him any," he replied. And he meant it. At home, the quiet settled into something heavier. They passed each other in hallways, sharing space but not lives. Some nights, she worked late, shoes discarded by the door, hair loosened, exhaustion etched into her shoulders. He cooked when she forgot to eat. She never commented on it, just sat down and ate. Their marriage existed in small, functional gestures. A coat handed over without asking. A glass of water left beside a laptop. Nothing intimate, nothing false. And yet, something began to shift. He noticed the way she paused before entering rooms when he wasn't beside her. She noticed the way he checked his phone every night at the same time. One evening, she asked, "Does your daughter know?" "Not exactly," he said. "She knows I'm working with someone important." She nodded. "If that ever needs to change, tell me." He studied her face. "You'd be okay with it?" "Yes," she said. "I don't want this to hurt her." That mattered. More than the money. More than the view. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was watchful. The first argument happened over nothing. A dinner he missed. A message not returned quickly enough. "This can't feel like neglect," she said sharply. "Not in front of the board." "I was with my daughter," he replied, voice steady. "She was sick." The room went still. "I didn't know," she said. "You didn't ask." She exhaled slowly. "You're right." It was the first time she'd said that to anyone in his presence. Later that night, he found a blanket folded outside his daughter's room at the penthouse, prepared for a future visit that hadn't been discussed. He didn't mention it. Neither did she. The board grew quieter as weeks passed. Rumors softened into acceptance. Suspicion dulled under repetition. The brother watched more closely, and in the spaces between obligation and appearance, something fragile formed. Not love, not yet, but trust earned in silence. Power rarely collapsed all at once. It loosened first, quietly, in places most people didn't notice. He saw it in the way board members stopped interrupting her, in how meetings that once felt adversarial became cautious. The marriage had done what it was meant to do. Stability had returned, at least on the surface. But pressure didn't disappear. It only changed direction. Her brother grew restless. He started showing up more often, at lunches, at company events, even at their home under the guise of family dinners. Each visit felt like an inspection. "So," the brother said one night, slicing into his steak with unnecessary force, "how's married life treating you?" He met the question without flinching. "Busy." "Funny," the brother replied. "You don't look busy." She cut in smoothly. "He doesn't need to perform for you." The brother smiled, unbothered. "I'm just curious." Curiosity was a weapon when wielded by the wrong hands. Later, after the brother left, the penthouse felt colder. "He's testing you," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "And he's losing patience. That makes him dangerous." The next challenge came from the board. An emergency review. No warning. No explanation. She stood at the head of the table, composed as ever, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. He sat slightly behind her, exactly where optics demanded. A senior board member cleared his throat. "There have been concerns." "Concerns?" she echoed calmly. "About transparency. About influence." The pause was deliberate. Specifically, the man continued, about whether personal relationships are affecting executive judgment. All eyes shifted to him. The silence stretched. He felt the weight of it, of being the quiet variable in a room built on power. "If I may," he said. She didn't look at him, but her posture shifted, subtle permission. "I'm not involved in company decisions," he continued evenly. "I don't attend strategy meetings. I don't influence contracts." "Then why are you here?" the board member asked. "Because I'm her husband," he said simply. "Not her shield. Not her leverage." The room stilled. That answer wasn't in any script. Afterward, in the elevator, she let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did," he replied. "Because they're starting to think I'm the weakness. And you're not." He met her gaze. "No, I'm the line they can't cross." Something in her expression changed then, respect sharpening into something heavier. The cracks widened after that. The brother began pushing harder, leaking half-truths, planting doubt. Anonymous emails, subtle threats wrapped in concern. One night, she came home later than usual. Her composure was gone. "They're calling for a vote," she said, voice low. "They think they can force me out." "When?" he asked. "Soon." He didn't ask how soon. He knew what that meant. They sat across from each other at the kitchen island, the space between them smaller than it had ever been. "If this ends," she said carefully, "you can walk away clean." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "The contract," she said. "If I lose, there's no reason for you to stay tied to this." He thought of the clause she'd written herself, the one that protected him financially even in her failure. "You're preparing to fall," he said. "I'm preparing to be honest," she replied. Silence settled again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one hurt. "Why did you really choose me?" he asked suddenly. She hesitated longer this time. "Because you weren't impressed by me," she said. "And you weren't afraid of me." He absorbed that. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said softly, "I'm afraid of losing you." The words hung between them, raw and unguarded. He stood slowly. "I didn't agree to this to protect myself," he said. I agreed because you needed someone who wouldn't disappear when things got hard. She looked up at him, eyes searching. I'm not leaving, he continued. Not because of a contract. Because it's the right thing to do. Her breath caught. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday. By Thursday night, the brother made his move. A document surfaced. Twisted, incomplete, designed to implicate her in misconduct. She stared at it in disbelief. This is fabricated, she said. I know, he replied. But truth doesn't move as fast as lies. She sank into a chair, shoulders finally sagging under the weight she'd carried alone for too long. For the first time since the courthouse, he crossed the distance between them and placed a hand on her shoulder. Not as part of the act, as a choice. We'll face this together, he said. And in that moment power shifted, not in the boardroom, but in the space where trust replaced control. The boardroom was already full when they arrived. Too full. People who usually watched from a distance now occupied seats along the wall. Legal counsel, senior advisors, faces that only appeared when blood was expected to be drawn. The air carried the faint hum of restrained anticipation. She took her seat at the head of the table. He sat beside her. Not behind. Not hidden. That alone shifted the room. Her brother was already there, relaxed in a way that felt rehearsed. He didn't look at her at first. He looked at him, measuring, calculating. The chairperson cleared his throat. Let's begin. The document was projected onto the screen. The accusation unfolded in clean bullet points. Misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, conflict of interest. Carefully curated enough to feel credible. Damaging enough to demand consequence. Her brother spoke next. I didn't want this, he said, voice heavy with practiced regret. But the company deserves transparency. She listened without interruption. When it was her turn, she didn't rush. She stood slowly, resting her palms on the table. This document is incomplete, she said calmly. And deliberately so. Murmurs rippled. She gestured toward the screen. The omitted pages show who authorized the transaction, who benefited from it, and who later attempted to erase that trail. Her brother stiffened. You're deflecting, he snapped. No, she replied. I'm clarifying. She nodded toward him. May I? He asked. Every head turned. The chair hesitated, then nodded. He stood. He didn't raise his voice. I was brought into this marriage as a safeguard, he said plainly. A solution to a problem created by people who believed power mattered more than ethics. A few brows lifted. I've stayed quiet, he continued, because I believed the truth would speak for itself. He paused. But lies have momentum. He reached into his folder. Here are the original authorization logs, he said, placing copies on the table. Here are the timestamps. And here, he looked directly at the brother, is the signature trail. The room went still. The brother laughed once, sharp and hollow. You expect us to believe you? I expect you to verify, he replied. The lawyers moved quickly. Whispers. Page flips. The chairperson's face tightened. This changes things, she said slowly. The brother stood abruptly. This is manipulation. He's not neutral. He's benefiting from this marriage. That was the moment. He looked at her. Not for permission. For acknowledgement. Then he spoke. There's something you should know, he said. About that. The room froze. The contract ends today, he continued. Regardless of the outcome. She turned toward him, eyes wide. What are you doing? She whispered. Choosing, he replied quietly. He faced the board again. I'm walking away from the financial protections outlined in the agreement, he said. I won't profit from this marriage. Gasped. Surprise. Calculation. The brother's confidence cracked. Why would you do that? The chair asked. Because the truth doesn't need leverage, he said. And integrity shouldn't come with a price tag. Silence followed. Long, heavy. Then the verdict came, not dramatic, not loud. Decisive. The accusations were dismissed. The brother was placed under investigation. The vote shifted. Control stayed where it belonged. But something else broke. Outside the boardroom, the adrenaline faded, leaving only the weight of what had been said. She followed him into the hallway. "You didn't have to give that up," she said, voice tight. "I did," he replied. "Because if I stayed silent, I'd always wonder whether this was built on convenience." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "it's built on truth, or nothing." They stood there, no longer protected by pretense. The contract was over. So was the silence. The building emptied slowly after the board meeting, as if everyone needed time to decide how they would remember what had just happened. Lawyers disappeared first. Executives followed, speaking in hushed tones, already rewriting narratives to suit tomorrow's meetings. He didn't stay. Neither did she. They rode the elevator down in silence, not the guarded kind they had mastered over months, but something heavier, uncertain, exposed. The contract that had defined their lives no longer existed. For the first time since the courthouse, there was no structure holding them in place. When the doors opened to the underground parking, she stopped walking. "It's really over," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Everything we agreed to." She nodded slowly, as if testing the word. Over. They drove separately. That night, the penthouse felt unfamiliar. Too large, too quiet, stripped of purpose. He packed methodically, not in anger, not in haste, just enough to leave without turning the act into another performance. She watched from the doorway. "You don't have to go tonight," she said. "I think I do," he replied. "If we're going to figure out what this is, it shouldn't start with confusion." She swallowed. "And if it's nothing, then at least it will be honest." He left before she could answer. The next weeks passed differently than the months before. No schedules, no shared dinners, no carefully constructed appearances, just absence. He returned to his smaller apartment, to school mornings and late dinners, to a life that fit again, even if it felt quieter. His daughter noticed the change immediately. "You seem lighter," she said one evening, curling beside him on the couch. "Do I?" he asked. She nodded. "Like you're not pretending anymore." Children always knew. At the office, rumors followed her. Not about the scandal that had been contained, but about him. About why he'd walked away when he could have stayed. She shut them down every time. "It was his choice," she said. "And I respected it." That respect became something else. Something she hadn't expected to feel so sharply in his absence. Weeks later, she stood in the doorway of his apartment. No coat, no entourage, no rehearsed explanation. "I didn't come to ask you back," she said. He waited. "I came to ask you something simpler." She met his eyes. "Would you have dinner with me?" Not a contract. Not a rescue. A question. He smiled, small, real. "Yes," he said. They ate at a quiet place nearby. No cameras. No expectations. Just conversation that wandered, unguarded and genuine. She laughed more than he'd ever seen her laugh. He talked about his daughter without fear of it being a liability. When the night ended, neither rushed the goodbye. "Whatever this becomes," she said softly, "it's your choice." He nodded. "And yours." Months later, they stood together again. This time in a park, not a courthouse. His daughter ran ahead, chasing pigeons, carefree and loud. She watched her, smiling. "You don't have to fit into my life," she said. "I can build a new one." He reached for her hand, not out of necessity but want. "I don't need saving," he said. "I just need honesty." She squeezed his hand. "I can do that." What remained after choice wasn't certainty. It wasn't power. It wasn't even love, at least not yet. It was something quieter. Mutual respect. Shared truth. A future not guaranteed but freely chosen. And for the first time, that was enough.